My name is Jericho Parms. I'm the Vice President for Institutional Advancement here at Vermont College of Fine Arts, and also honored to be a member of the Con Hogan Award Committee. I'd like to take just a brief moment to welcome you all here. And by that I mean all of the wonderful people who have made it to join us in person. It's so good to see many of you in this space. I also want to welcome those who are joining us thanks to CCTV and the live stream of this event. As some of you may know, Con Hogan was a founding board member of Vermont College of Fine Arts. And while I did not have the honor of knowing Con personally, I've always felt like his spirit is really sort of embedded in the walls of this building, just as much as it clearly permeates throughout the wonderful state of Vermont and really beyond. I do have the honor of knowing Con's brother, Michael, who currently serves on VCFA's board, and whose leadership is marked by what I understand to be the same fierce intelligence, warmth, and empathy. Michael couldn't join us today, but we hope he's doing well and is tuning in from afar. I also want to say a hello and welcome to Jeanette, who might be out there as well, who was so gracious enough to have us all at her home recently for a wonderful gathering that was marked by storytelling and the buzzing of hummingbirds. I've served on the Con Hogan Award Committee for now 3 years, and I've grown increasingly familiar with Con's legacy, his commitment to leadership, and the ways he's impacted so many people's lives. We're going to hear quite a bit more about that this evening as we honor this year's recipient, which we're so excited to do. So with that, I welcome you all to settle in. And I'm going to turn it over to our MC for the evening, my wonderful fellow committee member, Eitan Nasruddin Longo. Eitan.
Sometimes electronics work really well, and other times not. Here we are, though. No. Good afternoon, and welcome everyone to the presentation ceremony for the 2023 Con Hogan Award. I am Eitan Nasruddin Longo, a member, as Jericho points out, of the Con Hogan Award Committee, and I'm also, it's not how I make money. I'm a co-director of fair and impartial policing and community affairs for the Vermont State Police. In other words, a civilian. I'd like to thank Bella and her band, Roses and Rye, for providing the music for our ceremony today. And before we move into the content of our ceremony, let me explain that we are here tonight in person, as well as some of who are watching this on YouTube live stream. We thank our partners, as Jericho said, at CCTV, right? Yeah, who are handling the technology for us today, except for this Mac, which is doing whatever it's doing. The live stream will be available online through the Vermont Community Foundation website. So if you would like to look later, go there. The late Con Hogan was an important figure in Vermont. From his work in the public, nonprofit, and private for-profit sectors, he exemplified the kind of thinking and leadership that Vermont needs as we address the challenges of this century. Con's down-to-earth management approach was always backed by both sophisticated, tested theory and a nuts and bolts practicality. I'm going to go further, not just Vermont. Not just Vermont. I think the world needs that. Given what's been going on in the last week, nuts and bolts practicality, sophisticated tested theory, down-to-earth management approach, I'm going to go further than Vermont and say that Con has something to teach the planet. The Con Hogan Award was created in 2015 as a way of recognizing the contributions made by Con to the state of Vermont by encouraging and rewarding leaders who, first, share his vision of a Vermont that places the highest value on the public good. And secondly, people who demonstrate his leadership quality in achieving results. This year, we are pleased to present this award to H.B. Lozito, Executive Director of the Brattleboro-based Out in the Open. Before we move on, I'd like to call attention to three groups of people. First is the Con Hogan Award Committee, of course, which oversees this program. Could you all, when I call your name, just somehow call attention to yourself? Well, I mean in an appropriate fashion, but somehow call attention to yourself in some appropriate way, yes. The award committee, first, Will Boulanger from the Vermont Community Loan Fund. Paul Stillo, who I always want to turn into CEO because he's a relative of Cervantes, from the Public Assets Institute. John Cosina from the Vermont Community Foundation. Steve Dale, former Human Services Manager. Where are you? There you are. Scott Johnson, Chair of the Hogan Award Committee. And God bless and thank him. The Reverend Arnold Isidore Thomas, pastor of the Good Shepherd Lutheran Church of Jericho. Diana Wale, Wyndham Southeast Supervisory Union. And then just me. Second, I want to recognize the award recipients of the Con Hogan Award from the previous 8 years. And if you're here, please do the same. Again, decently. Ellen Collar of the Vermont Sustainable Jobs Fund. Michael Monte, Champlain Housing Trust. Holly Morehouse, Vermont After School, and currently with the Vermont Community Foundation. James Baker, criminal justice consultant and former commissioner of corrections. Jan Damers, currently statewide coordinator of the Community Action Agencies of Vermont. And then the Vermont Department of Health, which I know is not here, which won it in the year 2020, wasn't it? Yes. Lydia Clemens of the Clemens Family Farm. And then last but not least, from last year, Joe Wea, from the Refugee Resettlement Director of the Ethiopian Community Development Council's Multicultural Community Center. Last but not least, the Hogan family are represented here tonight. Are we all here? Con's daughter Ruth and her husband Bo.
Bo's here.
Bo's here. Got it. Ruth's not here. She's got horse duty, right?
Yes.
Got it. Okay. His son Neil and his wife Becky.
Neil is here.
Neil. Becky is. I like the idea of horse duty as a metaphor somehow. His brother Michael and his partner Bonnie are not able to be with us tonight, but they are certainly here in spirit. And Jeanette Hogan, Con's wife, is joining us via Zoom. So, hello to all of you and welcome. A few reflections on Con. I would like to quote Chris Graff, who commented on Con's books. This is a quote. Con Hogan has worn more and varied hats than any other dozen people put together. Corrections officer, banjo player, cabinet member, gubernatorial candidate, businessman, farmer, policy expert, advocate for children and health care. He has covered all the bases. Con's storytelling is 1 part life lesson and 3 parts laughs. He captures the greatness and quirks of so many Vermonters. We are also going to build into this a few readings from some very short chapters from Con Hogan's storytelling books. And I would like to invite the Reverend Lisa Sparrow, who Community Church, to come up and do some of those readings. And I say retired, that's kind of in quotes, right? Because I feel like I'm in a room of people who understand retired as either aspirational or really as, oh good, now I can go do other things that really need to get done. And I think that's Lisa. So Lisa, please come up, Reverend.
I'm so excited to be able to do this, especially when HB is the person who is receiving this award, because she really does capture Con's humor, compassion, practicality, and persistence. So I'm just delighted to do this, and I hope you enjoy these stories. The first one that I was asked to read is called Larry, and I think it will help you understand the story if I read just one sentence from the previous story where he was talked about. The first part of the book, he was actually in a correctional facility as somebody who had tried to escape. And Con says he was an excitable man. He was a skinny guy with a long Fu Manchu mustache, accentuated by the intent look in his eyes. So I just want you to imagine that Larry as we go through this first story. Con writes, "Earlier in this short book, I described the wild-eyed and unpredictable Larry Ellison in the vignette about the riot at Windsor Prison. The incident was reported in the Peter Langrock book, Famous Criminals of Addison County, which was published in early 2000. I had just finished reading the book early on a sunny February morning and was catching up on my reading in our office at home when the phone rang at about 9 a.m. It was Larry Ellison. I hadn't heard of or from Mr. Ellison in almost 30 years. My last interaction with him was at Windsor Prison during the riot, when he and I were on opposite sides of the negotiating table. What a surprise this was. The book had caused him to look me up in the phone book and give me a call. It was a fascinating conversation. I asked him where he was and what he was doing with his life. He went on to relate that he continued to get in trouble after being released from prison and soon found himself in even more serious trouble out in California, where the deadly combination of his use of alcohol, drugs, and violence landed him in the brutal California prison system. I asked him where he was today and from where he was calling me. He said, "Mr. Hogan, you won't believe this, but I'm a corrections officer in your Department of Corrections." I had recently finished my tenure as secretary of Vermont's Agency of Human Services, and the Corrections Department was part of that agency. Larry went on to tell me that after the California experience, he cleaned up his life and slowly but surely climbed back to respectability. About 5 years ago, the thought had struck him that he knew more about how offenders think and act than most people, and perhaps he could contribute to the rehabilitation of some of these young people by being part of the correction system. So he began a long quest to be allowed to become a corrections officer in the Vermont Department of corrections. At first, he was rebuffed, but he continued to try every avenue until one day he received a notice from the State Department of Personnel that he was eligible to take the civil service test to become a corrections officer. By the time he had finished his story, I had learned he was presently an officer at the Chittenden Correctional Facility in South Burlington. And in his words, "I am one of your best officers," end quote. I didn't doubt that at all, but just to make sure, after our conversation was over, I called the then Commissioner of Corrections, Mr. John Gorchik, to confirm this amazing story. John knew all about it and was very pleased with the way it had all turned out. Then there's a great picture of Larry with his Fu Manchu mustache and his uniform. A quiet phone relationship with Larry developed between us, along with an occasional visit to our farm from Larry. In 2001, I entered a period of what I now call my period of temporary insanity. I decided to run for the governorship, first as a moderate Republican and then as an independent, when it became clear I would get no help from the Republican Party. It was a wonderful journey, however predictably, resulting in a resounding defeat. All through the journey, Larry Ellison was with me. He had offered to become one of my volunteer drivers as we plied the state in the highly emblazoned Hogan for Governor motorhome that I had acquired for the life of the campaign. Larry was tireless in my promotion and occasionally my defense. I remember vividly one afternoon in Wilmington, Vermont, when some loggers who wanted to know my views on a variety of issues stopped our van on the road. They pressed me hard with an aura of skepticism until Larry, silent to that point, couldn't take it any longer. Was for me to go into the pasture with a 40-foot rope in my left hand and the end of the rope, which had a snap ring, in my right hand. So rope, ring. Fortunately, the bull had a nose ring, as many bulls do. I dutifully followed Harold's instructions to go under the barbed wire fence as quickly and quietly as I could and to snap the end of the rope onto the bull ring. That part went okay. However, as soon as the rope was attached to the bull became very angry very quickly. "Harold, what do I do now?" I asked in a somewhat panicky way. "Keep the rope and start to run along the fence line. The bull will chase you." This did not sound like a good idea to me, but what did I know? I started to run. The bull had already started running at me, and I really had no choice but to run. Harold, by now, was in his pickup following me and the bull down the road just outside the pasture line. "Harold, now what?" I hollered. "Keep running to the telephone pole," Harold yelled back. About 30 yards farther down the fence line, 15 feet inside the fence, was a Green Mountain telephone pole. "You go on the inside and let the bull run to the outside," Harold offered, giving me another small piece of this plan. I did just that, and the bull also played his part. That left us both in motion, with both of us now starting to wrap around the pole from different directions. After one complete revolution, it became clear that the bull's awesome power had been harnessed by the pole, and because I had the other end of the rope, I was close to being under control too. I pulled the rope, bringing the bull ever closer to the telephone pole, and even I could now see the next move, which was to snub the bull's nose against the pole. I did just that, but the bull was not completely mobilized. After I snubbed his nose with a second loop, and then moving around the pole one more time, Harold came into the pasture with the kerosene. So you can imagine, I guess, the bull's there against the telephone pole. They have this rope around there. So Harold came into the pasture with the kerosene. The kerosene, I'm sure, stung the bull badly, but he let us know it, but there wasn't anything he could do about it. One by one, Harold pulled out the quills. Their greatest danger is that, if not dealt with, the quills will slowly but surely work themselves into the flesh even more, and eventually end up in the brain of the animal. He still wasn't a happy bull, but he was a much healthier bull when we finished. Over the 30 years since this happened, I've never been in a situation where a similar technique to control a large animal was needed. But if it ever occurs again, I'll be thinking of Harold Muzzy, and that's no bull.
There is a box of books that's right down there, and at the end, I will put it in the middle of the stage. In case you want to know more stories, please feel free to take one of the books. I want one. Okay. Now, I'd like to, well, first of all, the Hogan Committee is delighted to have Joe Wea, who was last year's honoree, share some remarks and his reflections on being the 2022 Con Hogan Award winner. Joe, would you like to come up? And thank you.
Good evening. So every year, the winner of the previous year is asked to speak to the winner about what has changed as a result of winning this award. So HB Lozito, I'm so proud that my fellow Brattleboro resident is the winner of this year. I'm sure as it was to me, it came as a surprise when you heard that you were this year's winner of this prestigious award. I must say that at least in my case, it changes everything for you in a very positive way. I'm also guessing that you never thought you would be a winner of such a prestigious award. At the same time, when you look back, at this moment, this is a recognition of all the hard work, dedication, sleepless nights you put in over the years. So I have two simple things to share with you, and please bear with me. You may have already done that, but if you haven't, The first simple thing I ask you to try to do is to try to find a time to reflect on what this moment actually means. In my case, this award made me realize the deep African philosophy, Ubuntu, which means I am because we are, and we are because I am. And I will come to that later. And the second thing I want to share with you tonight is to identify something that furthers the legacy of Con in what you do every day. And in my case, the assistant of my with the assistance of my good friend Karen right there, I focus on something that improved me as a person, and also things that improve my organization. And that particular something is executive coaching, and I will come to it. So when I look over when I took over the leadership of ECDC Vermont in 2001, to be honest with you, I had no clue what I was getting into. After weeks into my job, I quickly realized the enormous task that was before me. First, I was asked to set up an organization in a very short period of time. Second, to resettle refugees in a region that has never received refugees since the early 70s. And third, I was asked to quickly find housing for over 100 refugees that were arriving. Faced with these challenges, there were times when I could not handle the pressure. Even now, faced with these challenges, there were times, added to that was the excitement and, an expectation of our communities what to do. Many nights I thought to myself, is it really worth it? And then came the Con Hogan Award that changed everything. After it was announced to me on dreadful bed of mine struggling with COVID, as I always do, I started analyzing what that actually meant. But it didn't really occur to me the deeper meaning that I attached to this award until I returned to Africa, the country, Liberia, which I was born. A month after the ceremony here, I went on a vacation in Liberia, and part of that trip was to share this award with my family and friends. The first person that presented it to was my immediate family, my children, and my mom. But my mom had no clue what that actually meant. I explained to her that I was recognized because of the work I do. She paused for a moment and then asked, so they really recognize you because of sitting behind the desk and write? And I said, no, Mom. The real thing I do is helping people who fled their countries because of war. And when she heard about people who fled their homes because of war, and I was helping them resettle, she paused for a while. I guess she was thinking that, and she was linking that to the brutal 14 years of conflict that Liberia had. She asked me again, is that what you do? I said, yes. And then she said, and raised her two hands to heaven and said, son, I'm so proud of you. And she began to cry. This award had an impact on someone I deeply love. It deeply transformed my mother in a way that I've never seen before. So when I returned to the United States, I started deeply reflecting on what this award really, really means. And born and raised in Africa, I came to the conclusion that my service to humanity is something bigger than me. I am because we are, and we are because I am. This concept rejects the emphasis on individualism. For some of us who read philosophy, Rene Descartes is often called the first modern philosopher, and his famous saying, I think, therefore I am, laid the groundwork for how we conceptualize our sense of self in contemporary society. But in African concept of humanity, there is an entirely different way to think about personal identity. It is a concept in which your sense of self is shaped by your relationship with others. It is a way of living that begins with the premise that I am only because we are. It is a counterweight to the individualism. It is rooted in the relationship form of personhood, basically meaning that you are because of others. In practice, it means believing the common bonds within a group are more important than any individual arguments and divisions within it. And there's no doubt people will debate, people will disagree, and it's not like there is no tension. But it is about coming together and building a consensus around what is good for the community. It promotes restorative justice and a community-centric ethos. And as human beings, we have the ability to dig into that human values, to go for the best of them in order to bring about healing and bridge the gaps between us. With that reflection, I knew I was only the face of a collective shared value of our humanity and the community in which I live. I'm only asked to lead what the community believes in. While I'm leading in front or from the front, there are hundreds of people, hundreds of Vermonters who share this value and push me from behind. And looking back, since January of 2002 till now, we have well over 250 refugees we call New Americans from Afghanistan, Syria, Iraq, Central African Republic, the Democratic Republic of Congo, Yemen, Eritrea, Ukraine, Guatemala, Haiti, residing in Southern Vermont. Compared to the national average, 90% of refugees who came to Vermont are still residing here. Well, you may ask, but what is the point? Well, the success I just mentioned is happening because of the shared value, the common good of the community. It is happening because we are, so therefore I am. We at ECDC would never pull it off if not because of the community we serve. And as leaders, we should not forget that. Second, please identify something that further improves you and the people you work for. In my case, after winning the award and talking with my friend, I concluded that to be an effective leader, I needed help. So with advice from a very good friend, we identified a crucial area that needed help, and that is executive coaching. As you may know, in our nonprofit world, you may find grants for staff training and capacity building, but very difficult to find grants that are geared towards coaching you especially. And being the head of an institution, you are often isolated and find yourself alone. Your staff count on you to lead them and provide advice. You, on the other hand, may not have that person who said, I have your back. So I identified 2 executive coaches. A coach who focuses on helping me address the internal organizational challenges, staffing, organizational charts, staff management, workflow, to improve efficiency across all different areas of our organization. And another coach who focuses on helping me address external challenges, from how we deal with factors that are external to us but affect what we do every day. For For example, as you all know, how to work with external partners, how to address the housing crisis. These are things that are beyond what I do. And today, this afternoon, I was at the state office just talking about just housing. But also, it's a place that I can just sit quietly and talk any bullshit. So as you take all this in, I advise you to find a time for yourself to reflect on what this really means for you. And second, identify what you want to do next. Again, congratulations, and a thank you to the Con Hogan family for inviting me back. Thank you.
In case the point hasn't been made enough yet, there is an extraordinary overrepresentation of Windham County in this room. I live in Putney, although I grew up in Newfane, because I wouldn't want to leave the county. And one Putney resident who sadly passed away last summer, or this summer, I guess, used to refer to Windham County as the Southeast Queendom. She said this once in a meeting with the governor. "We want you to know who we are," she said. This was during the discussions that were being held in the legislature that led to civil unions. And she said, "I welcome you to the Southeast Queendom." And we were all a little speechless, like, oh, Lord, go, sure she goes again. But the Southeast Queendom. There are a lot of interesting people in the Queendom. And HB is one of them. Now, one of the cool things about the Queendom is we don't all know each other. We actually really don't know each other. And so this is the part where I introduce HB. I don't know HB. Some of you look really worried right now. You look really like, where's this gonna go? What I'm gonna say is, though, we kind of met in 2020, and when we finally met in 2023, I was amazed to find out that they weren't two-dimensional. Because, of course, in 2020, everybody became two-dimensional, or was simply a disembodied voice. And I don't remember what meeting we were in. Do you remember? I mean, I just feel like it's been meetings for the last 3 years and looking at my screen. So, okay, I'm glad you don't remember either, but I mean, in any event, there we were, and we were early, and we started talking. And I was like, oh, this is HB. I had heard about HB. And one of the most wonderful ways I had heard about HB was somebody that I knew said to me, they saved me. I said, tell me about that. And this wasn't, in reference to anything other than this person. And what it was a conversation that you may not even remember. This person is trans. And as we all know, that was then becoming, as it is now, really scary. It's a very scary identity. And HB gave them courage. That's what I needed to know. That's what a resident of the Queendom does. So with that, I would like to just shut up and welcome the winner of the 2023 Con Hogan Award, HB Lozito. HB.
Thank you, thank you, thank you. I'm going to take a risk here with water and computer, so we're in this together. Eitan should have given me more time between a tear-jerking story and being up here with all of you, but thank you so much. You can start. This will enjoy some photos of folks that I've worked with over the last bit of time. You may see yourself in here. Thank you, Eitan. I'm HB Lizito. I'm the executive director of Out in the Open. I think I've started about every talk I've given in front of a group in that exact way for the last 10 years, and it's really a treat to be doing so with you now. For those who are not familiar with Out in the Open, I think I say this a lot too. We are a multiracial grassroots movement building and capacity building organization. We are based in Brattleboro and also in Central Maine. I can't look at my mom here in the front. And we connect rural LGBTQ people to build community, visibility, knowledge, and power. I'm so pleased and honored to be here with you today as this year's recipient of the very illustrious Con Hogan Award. And I want to start by saying thank you to Jeanette, who I know is with us via Zoom, and to Con's family here. Thank you so much for being here. Jeanette did a wonderful job of opening her home to me, at sharing about Con and her family's legacy. It's really a true joy to be able to carry on his work in a small way. Thank you to the award committee for your careful consideration, and for your very kind and enthusiastic welcome into this group of honorees. We had a very joyful lunch. Yes, you've heard about the hummingbirds. Lots of laughs and just enjoying being together. Thank you to Bella and to Rosa Zimrai for being here. I had the great pleasure of getting to know Bella a little bit earlier this year, and I'm so happy you can be here. And I want to say thank you so much to the tech and event and catering staff for making this day possible. I'm often on that end of things, and really just a treat to be able to walk in somewhere and have delicious food provided, so thank you so much. I have been really struggling over the past several weeks with how to structure this talk. Some of you may feel similarly. It's really hard to talk about myself. I kept thinking, am I supposed to be talking about me? When I sat down at lunch with folks, I think Scott just said, tell us your life story. I was like, all right, we're gonna go for this. Am I supposed to be talking about my work? Both of those things, something else. And I'm going to repeat, actually, Joe and I have a lot of themes, a lot of what Joe was saying. I was like, yes, we'll hear these things again. I did get where I needed to go eventually, as with many of the other places I've been, with some help. One of my favorite parts of my week is when I get to drive one of our queer families' kids to school every week. And on our drive this past week, they said, after a few minutes of silent Calvin and Hobbes reading in the back seat, which I don't know how they do that, tell me a story from your life. Our early morning conversations often stick with me, and I don't know why this broad and wise prompt felt so helpful, but it arrived at really the perfect time. Over the weekend, it struck me suddenly, oh, I should just tell a story from my life next week, and then all the other pieces really seemed to fall into place. I had been very challenged to figure out what and how I wanted to share with you all today, and that seemed especially difficult when I kept thinking it had to be all about me. When, of course, nothing in my life really has ever, or in my work, has been all about me at all. Often when I share stories of the early days at Out in the Open, I talk about how I was our only paid staff member, but even then I was never alone. We have long had a very dedicated group of board members, both past and present, some of who are here with us today, who have been very actively involved in every single part of Out in the Open from the beginning. Just as often as I have told stories of being our only paid staff member, I've also said we do pretty much everything we do in collaboration. Whether that was because we needed space or funds or a megaphone to borrow, chairs or feedback, or lots of other things. It wasn't out of necessity, or not only out of necessity, but it was and is out of a true belief that we are all better off together. When I started in my position at Out in the Open, which some folks may remember was initially called Green Mountain Crossroads, I was really an emerging leader myself. I had never held an executive director position before, and I started this one at 20 hours a week while I was working 2 and sometimes 3 other jobs at the same time. There were years when I worked 7 days a week, weekdays at Out in the Open, and weekends at Morningside Shelter, which is now Groundworks Collaborative, or editing film. You saw John Scagliotti here at the beginning, our hometown hero in Guilford, wonderful filmmaker. During my first year Out in the Open, we completely changed the mission, vision, values, and the vast majority of the programming that we were doing. We also worked really hard on building that dedicated, yes, I see some nods, yes, folks remember that, on building that dedicated group of board members. In that first year, our board changed over about 4 times. And while I had never been an executive director before, I had worked at a lot of nonprofits before in the past, and board members had always sort of had this strange mystique surrounding them. I would ask myself questions like, who are the board members? Not of my own organization, but prior organizations. Can I even talk to them as a staff member? Am I allowed to speak with them? Are they personally connected to or affected by the mission of the organization? What qualities and skills did they have? And as we started building Out in the Open, we asked, could we shape an organization that would keep rural LGBTQ people at the center while building the skills and knowledge of our community? That last question was not fully formed in that specific way, really, until I was writing this over the weekend, but has become definitely a driving force in everything we do. All of our board members are members of our community, and many are either first-time board members or folks who are in leadership in a board for the first time. This question of keeping our folks at the center while building skills extended to me too. In addition to never having been an executive director before, I had never written a grant before. When I started in April of 2014, we had $3,500 in the bank, which was a special and urgent needs grant from Vermont Community Foundation, so thank you, VCF. And seemingly no more on the way, really. We didn't know where our next dollar was going to be coming from. If folks have met Emily Marker, she'll tell you when she gets the first ability to do so, there were many years where a large part of our monthly board meetings were a section where we would look at how much money do we have in the bank right now, and how many more weeks, sometimes how many more days, can we continue paying my part-time salary? And that was part of our practice for quite a long time in the early days while we were starting out. Eventually, that moved to how many more months can we pay me? Then it moved to how many more months can we pay me and our rent, and on from there. I am now thrilled and sometimes astonished to share that we are now a full-time staff of 9, spread throughout Vermont as well as central Maine. Yes. With an annual budget over $500,000. So how did we go from $3,500 and just me to many full-time staff members spread across hundreds of miles and a growing budget, all while staying true to our values the past 9 years? And people who know me will hear me say this all the time. We have done that largely through trust and relationships. Trust and relationships, all the many types of information that come along with building and maintaining those, are really sort of the data that we base our work on. The one thing that we've always had is trust from our community. When we didn't have any money, when we didn't have any relationships with funders or any tried and true programming, we did have the trust that we had earned from our community. You can see it in the pictures rolling. Oh, this is a good one. Can see it in the pictures rolling behind me. You'll notice many new faces as well as many repeated faces, some folks who are here tonight. Long-lasting relationships are a really big part of my personal life and a big part of my life at Out in the Open. While I did not have the pleasure of knowing Con Hogan, from the number of people who have been in touch with me since this news was made public, who have known him, it's clear that we have that in common. I've received phone calls. I don't know how they got my number, but I have received them. Letters, text messages, just a lot of people, some who are my colleagues and some people who are new to me, just wanting to express their excitement and tell me more about what a wonderful person he was. People that I've known and collaborators I've built relationships with over many years have helped me succeed and have helped this organization succeed. In addition to my family who is here today, their friends and colleagues, loved ones in the audience, both here and on Zoom, who I've been lucky to know and organize with for over 20 years. Can't look at my mother. You're gonna have to go stand in the back. And folks who are watching the live stream who have been in my life since first grade. Long relationships are part of what makes work and life in rural areas uniquely challenging as well as uniquely possible. And it's a big part of what made our Andrews Inn Oral History Project possible. This project was a collaboration among Vermont Performance Lab. Now I can't look at anybody. Oh my gosh, you all are so lovely. Marlborough College, photographer Evie Lovett, the Rockingham Arts and Museum project, and Out in the Open. Pieces of it also eventually included the State of Vermont Historic Preservation Office, Popolo Restaurant, the Rockingham Select Board, the Vermont Folklife Center, and many others. Andrews Inn, raise your hand if you're familiar with Andrews Inn? Yes, yes. Oh, many fans who are not familiar. Andrews Inn was a bar and a hotel, a community space that was open in Bellows Falls, Vermont, about 20 minutes north of where we are in Brattleboro, from 1973 until April Fool's Day in 1984. It catered to the LGBTQ community and was run by gay people, but it was also a space for the whole community to come together. Our project was the first publicly available cohesive history of this place and its life-giving role in people's lives. This project started as a course that I co-designed and co-taught at Marlborough College alongside Vermont Performance Lab artist Dane Gordon and professors Kate Ratcliffe and Brenda Foley, called The Politics of Change, Radical Movements of the Late 20th Century. Throughout the semester, we paired students with local community activists to explore and learn more about their work and record oral history interviews with them. We kicked things off with a radical dinner in September in the lobby of the former Andrews Inn. All of this was largely even at all possible because of the deep and trusted relationships that Sarah Coffey, then executive director of Vermont Performance Lab, held already and was willing to share with us. Woo. At that first radical dinner, people excitedly shouted stories for the first time that I was hearing about Andrews Inn. Until then, it had always been sort of a whisper here and there, and here we were in public, hearing a lot about that, about the women's bar being downstairs, and about room 26, about the disco ball spinning, and about the importance of community. As part of that class, one of our students, Rainbow, recorded the interview with Eva Mondin that would become part of the publicly available oral history project. Once the course concluded, I continued on with more interviews and research, eventually recording over 30 hours of interviews with people who were at Andrews Inn, and unearthing dozens of newspaper articles, both from local papers like the Bellows Falls News Review and the Brattleboro Reformer, as well as national gay papers like RFD and Blue Boy Magazine and the Feminist Renaissance. I largely interviewed people in their own homes or in other places that were really important to them, and would typically schedule at least 4 hours, one for the interview and then 3 or more additional hours for things like enjoying mushroom soup that they had made me, petting their dogs, receiving a tour of their carved rock collection, their vast hammock collection, or the home that they had built with their friends in the 70s on a gay commune in Western Massachusetts. Or my personal favorite, being an audience of one for a personalized fashion show of their full fur coat collection. One person who's part of this project at the end of our interview said to me, and I'm paraphrasing, "Will you let me know before you publish this? I have never talked publicly about my involvement at Andrews Inn, and my kids have no idea about any of this part of my life. I want to make sure that I can talk with them before it's made public." If that isn't trust, I don't know what is. I feel very lucky that this group of elders opened their hearts and their homes to me and have trusted me to share their stories. I would like to share one excerpt from this project with you now. Here is about 4.5 minutes from Eva Mondin.
At that time, I was in Westminster Fire Department, and we started a first response squad in Westminster, and we're trying to get the fire department to recognize it and include us. And there were 3 women in the fire department. I was down behind the Popolos. There's a canal, and we had a pumper truck, and we were pumping the water up to the fire. And there was no way. It was a 4-story brick building, so the floors would burn out, and they were falling, and then the walls were going to go. Let's see, the wall towards us and the wall towards the front, I think must have gone at the same time. And there was a substation right behind it. So when the wall went on our side, it hit the power line, and that started dancing on the snow. And they pulled us in, the Andrews Inn. Now, I said through a window, and now when I think about it, it was probably a door with snow built up at the door. And they pulled us through a back door because we had nowhere to go. And we were scared, really. We levitated and walked on that snow and went through that door, yeah. outside there, you'll see two benches, two marble benches with the name of two firefighters who died in that fire. So, inside the bar, they say, Eve, you want to take out coffee and cigarettes? So, the generators were set up, the lights came on, you know, the power's totally out, and so I go back in the inn and get a tray, and they had lit candles, and so I got a tray with coffee and cigarettes. Now, I didn't smoke at the time, but, you know, under pressure, if somebody needs something, I'm there for them. And here they are at a fire, smoking a cigarette. And at that point, I didn't have a full uniform. I had a coat. On the back of it, it said Westminster Fire Department. And I had jeans on and boots. And I'm carrying the tray when the town manager comes over and takes a cup of coffee. And I say to him, excuse me, sir, this is for the folks in my fire department. And he looked at me, he picked the cup up, he dropped it, so it splashed up on me. And my fire chief across the way came running. He came running, and I kept going with the tray. And he came running. I knew he was going to chew this guy up. And probably 2 weeks later, my housemate lover at the time, well, I was in a relationship with two women, they arrived with the uniform with my name on the back and the right size for me, and the pants and the suspenders and so on. Transformation happens in all of us, sometimes like that, and sometimes it's a gradual thing. And I think that was what was happening, and I was privileged to be a part of it. Really privileged to be a part of it. And after that, I didn't hear jokes about the Andrews Inn around the fire department and ridiculous things being said. Yeah. I think self-reflection is a big part of it. Yeah. And to be a first responder for me in this area, where in the middle of winter, you go down over the bank and you know that rescue is going to take forever to get here. You're down over the bank with somebody and they may be doctor, lawyer, merchant, chief, whatever they are. Nobody asked me what my sexual preference is or my political beliefs. They were happy to see me to assist. And that's the thing, is that, yeah, you can catch a lot more flies with honey than you can with vinegar. And for me, that's important way to lead my life. And it doesn't mean that I haven't gone through stages of real anger and rage at the ignorance and madness of things. That is the biggest thing. Yeah, that inch by inch and row by row, that's the way the world, it's not transformed, but that it meets, because it's rain that wears away the rock.
Thanks, Jericho. So that was Eva Mondin. We lost Eva earlier this summer. And since we published this project, we have also lost Andrews Inn founder John Moises in the summer of 2019. I said this at our Andrews Inn panel at the Brattleboro Museum and Art Center last month, and it bears repeating. Strongly encourage you to talk with the elders in your life, even if you consider yourself an elder. And if you don't have any in your life, go find some. Not just elders from within our LGBTQ community, but absolutely also them. They've got really important stories to tell and share. Record their stories, ask them about their lives, ask them about your life. After hundreds of hours of editing, even over 6 years later, I often find myself hearing snippets of these interviews playing in my mind, and that's definitely true with this piece of Eva's. When listening back to this piece this week, the strength and determination in her voice when she says rain, and it's rain that wears away the rock, truly struck me. And I hadn't heard that before until listening this week. While this interview was recorded in 2015, this notion of they didn't care who I was, whether I was doctor or lawyer, they didn't ask me about my political beliefs, my sexual preferences, they were happy to see me, has continued to drive a lot of our new work forward at Out in the Open over the past year as well. Around this time last year, I was writing what would now be our biggest grant to date that honestly seemed like a complete and total long shot. I was responding to a national RFP from a new consortium of funders called the New Pluralists, an intentionally broad spectrum of funders working together to see if they can heal some of the division within the United States by funding work particularly aimed at doing so. We received word on December 20th, 2022, went back and looked at my email, that we had been awarded a grant that was about 25 times my first year at Out in the Open salary, to expand our work in Maine, in the communities where I grew up, focused on deep leadership development, buy-in for rural LGBTQ people through 6-month or more fellowships for work on overcoming perceived and actual divisions. When I got the award email, it was far beyond our normal working hours. We had already entered a holiday break for Out in the Open, but I called my development director, Delia, at the time. I think I probably called some of the rest of you as well. She picked up, I shared, we both screamed, and then she also said she was in the middle of the grocery store and was maybe making the other shoppers nervous. But she did share my enthusiasm for all the excitement and the possibilities that this kind of support would bring. A lot of our work and my own experience served as inspiration for this work and this expanded part of our work, but Eva's words and thoughts have been absolutely central to that work as well. She had a very indelible sense of self, confident in what she was doing and with whom she was doing it, to sort of just keep going with the tray, as she shared in that piece, while knowing that her trusted people would back her up, to offer accountability when it was needed, and also make space for others to grow in their own learning, while being fully herself is so important in our work and such a necessary quality in being able to move us closer to the world that we all want to live in. It's part of what we're trying to do with all of our work. It's part of what we're trying to do with this new work, Exploring Pluralism. We've since launched the first pilot round of this fellowship that we're calling the Power and Belonging Network, and I'm so excited to see where this work can go. I'd love to someday bring a version of it here to Vermont. When we launched it on our social media, we got a lot of, is this in New Hampshire? Can it be in Vermont? Where is this? So excited about a lot of enthusiasm for that work as well. We are learning a lot. I'm continuing to learn a lot and have a lot of questions about pluralism. Is this an effective strategy for positive change? How do we hold strong to our values and make the bold statements and take decisive actions our community needs, while also bringing in people who may not share our perspective? How do we support and not alienate our community while creating space for dialogue, and many others? I am taking solace in the fact that folks like Eva Mondin and like Con Hogan have come before me to offer their own paths for evaluating these types of questions. Have a hypothesis, gather data, whether quantitative or qualitative, evaluate, make changes, and repeat. It's what I've been doing throughout in the Open for the past 9 years, and it's exactly what I'm planning to do for many years to come. It has been such a joy to be with you all this afternoon and to share the news of this award with colleagues, friends, and family. I start with thank yous. I like to end with thank yous. Want to wrap up with that as well. To our fabulous staff, many of whom are watching on Zoom. I still can't believe we have a staff sometimes. Thank you for trusting me, for laughing with me and pushing me, for giving me the grace and space to continue learning, and most of all, for your shared love of our incredible LGBTQ community. To our dear board members, past and present, thank you for all your many hours of work and for trusting and supporting me. Even when you weren't quite sure where a particular project was going, we also had a lot of those conversations. I think I can remember Emily, and especially saying, I have no idea where this is going, but I trust you, and I know we'll see where it ends up. Really gave me a lot of latitude to explore, as well as the steadiness to keep going. Joe mentioned executive coaching. Thank you to my coach, Nico, who has worked with Out in the Open about as long as I have. We've been very lucky to have some wonderful funders who knew that we needed things in addition to money and have supported us to have a coach for the last 7 years or more. Nico, your insight and thoughtfulness has been so helpful at many different points in my growth. To my queer family who are here and also on Zoom, I can't look at you either. Thank you for co-creating this beautiful life with me. Someone at an Out in the Open summit a few years ago asked me how to get a queer family, and I said, you just meet them and you never let go, which is what I'm deeply planning to do with all of you. To my best friends from home, who I believe are watching on Zoom, the first people I ever shared a matching tattoo with, there's no way I would have made it to any of this without you. To my partner, Mel, for the innumerable ways you support me and our family, too many to share here. I think I said this to you in the car, I did a little spoiler, who I'm very lucky must not have been nominated for this Con Hogan Award this year because she is very brilliant and her own work is amazing and she surely would have won. And to my mom and sister and aunt, oh my gosh, who are here today, thank you for loving me and laughing with me from the beginning. And thank you all for being here. And I'm excited to be back to share what's changed. Thanks, Joe, for setting that up in such a wonderful way. Thank you so much.
Thanks, HB. It was
Just for me, remembering Eva. She gave us the Southeast Queendom.
I promised myself I wouldn't do this. Closing remarks. When I look at everyone who's been named today, this afternoon, that phrase from what, the 70s, act locally, think globally, comes to mind. I used it early on to talk about my perception of what Con Hogan did. We are in dire need of that right now. We are living in a world where we are divided, we hate without reservation, we kill without reservation. What we need is that acting locally and thinking globally. Now here's the local part. One of the things that I do when I teach new recruits to any law enforcement agency in the state, I answer a question for them. I say, why is it that historically stigmatized communities have the feelings that they have about law enforcement? It's a great way not to raise defensiveness. And it works, I have to say. I'm proud of myself. But one of the things that happens after a 6-hour course of this, it's their first, they get more than that, but they get 6 hours of me. They're in shock. They have not thought about any of this before. They haven't thought about Birmingham. They haven't thought about Selma. They haven't thought about Stonewall. It's never come to them. Invariably, someone will say, what do we do? How do we fix this? And I remember once somebody saying that, and I, as a teacher, and that's by profession what I am, you want to just shoot yourself sometimes. Somebody asks a question, you're like, yeah, I don't know. And you just want to walk away and go, good luck with that. Suddenly, one day, and I remember it, I said, this is a quote that is attributed to both Mother Teresa and to Gandhi. And what it is we can do no great things, only small things with great love. And all of the awardees, including HB now, do that. And that's how we change. And that's how the hatred will stop. And that's how we will stop killing each other. And how we'll start learning to respect each other. Just within the reach of my arms, it will not be that way. And every one of you who have been involved with this, who've won this award, who sit on the committee, work like that. Please keep doing it, because if there is anything that is going to save this species, it's that kind of behavior. The cops get it. I look at them and I'm like, are you kidding me? You're in the biggest crisis law enforcement's been in for 50 years. What the hell are you all doing here? And then they look at me and they go, well, you just answered that. Let's help them answer that. We look forward to next year's 10th and final Con Hogan Award. We hope that you'll help us spread the word when we announce the request for nominations that will go out on May 1st. Think about acting locally, thinking globally, and think about small acts with great love. When you're looking and thinking about who to nominate, think of those things. Think of those things. I want to thank everyone for their ongoing support of this award that calls attention to efforts by Vermonters that serve the public good, frankly, the global public good. It may be in Vermont, but it's sending stuff out into the world. Thanks to all of you for taking the time to join us this afternoon and this evening to provide your support for this year's Con Hogan Award winner, H.B. Lozito. Good night, and thank you very much. Mm.